Hello there, everyone. Welcome to my Hades 2 impressions video, specifically my impressions based on the recently opened technical test. And by technical test, I mean that this was not expressly conducted in order to gather feedback or anything like that in terms of the gameplay or the balance. Although, naturally, I still want to give my impressions based on the gameplay and the balance. But first and foremost, this was expressly conducted in order to test the technical performance of the game, which I am happy to report is pretty good. I only had one real performance issue. The game did freeze once for me for a little bit. That was when that was one of the instances in which Artemis was showing up, although I was recording at the same time, so that probably had something to do with it, and I think I was playing on medium settings. And in terms of maybe potentially bugs, some of the sprint-related boons just were not working for me. Maybe I was just somehow horribly misunderstanding what the actual text was describing, but I could not get some of the sprint boons to actually have any effect. But again, that is probably a bug-related thing and not necessarily a performance thing. And I'm sure that all of the bugs will get ironed out with this game being in early access, or with it about to be in early access, right? That'll be a pretty big window for them to fix all of that kind of stuff. Also, something that I really hope gets fixed during early access before the game actually releases is something regarding this God mode, which is essentially this easy mode that you can turn on. I don't know how easy it makes the game. I never actually tried it. But with a name like God mode, I'm assuming it pretty much trivializes the difficulty of the game, right? And you might be thinking, Tanuki, what's the problem with a God mode? Let people have an easy mode. And you're right, I don't mind people having an easy mode. If people want to play on super easy mode, that's fine. My issue with it is that you can turn it on and off at will whenever you want, even mid-run, okay? And for one, when you have it turned on, there is no indicator of it being turned on the screen anywhere. So if you have God mode turned on and record a clip and then show somebody the clip, there's no way at a glance for them to know if the God mode is turned on or not, right? And secondly, because you can turn it on and off at will, even if you did have some indicator on screen to show when God mode is turned on, you could have it turned on for part of a run to get to a spot and then turn it off and record a clip. And then if people see that clip, they will have no way of knowing if you got there with or without God mode, right? So my two suggestions to the God mode is that, for one, there needs to be some kind of indicator on screen showing that God mode is turned on when it is turned on. And secondly, even if you can turn it on whenever you want, I think that once you turn it on in a run, you should not be able to turn it back off. So then, if they implement these two pieces of feedback, it means that whenever you see a clip of something with God mode turned off, you know they got to that point with God mode turned off the entire time, right? Because for somebody like me, I really like showing off gameplay of Hades, right? That was a big reason why I liked Hades 1 so much. I liked showing off these challenge runs and stuff with all the pacts of punishment and whatnot. So if I just want to show a clip of me doing a boss fight, that means if it stays like how it is, I'm going to have to not just upload a clip of the boss fight, I'm going to always have to include a link to the full run to prove that I got there without the God mode, which will be incredibly annoying if I have to do that every time I want to show off some gameplay footage, right? So again, they need to make an indicator on the screen when God mode is turned on, and they need to make it where you cannot turn it back off once you turn it on in the middle of a run. But in terms of gameplay, the thing I actually want to talk about for the majority of this video, they did add some new material gathering and farming mechanics. I'm sure some people will have more to say about that, but in terms of the material gathering stuff, I'm pretty indifferent on that. I mostly want to focus on the combat. So the main differences in the combat with this game compared to the first game is that mana is no longer required to do the cast. And by the cast, I mean in Hades 1, Zagreus could shoot out this projectile, and you would start with 1 MP, and then when you spend the 1 MP for a cast, you would drop the MP as this little gem, and you would have to pick it up again. So mana is no longer required to do the cast, nor do you have to pick it up again after expending it, because Melinui, she can cast without any kind of mana cost, and she can cast immediately again as soon as the previous cast has expired. However, there is still a mana system, although it's not required to cast. The mana is used for essentially EX versions of everything. I think in this game they're called Omega versions of attacks. So you have a basic attack, a special attack, and the cast, right? Melinui has an EX version of all three of those things. She has an EX version of the basic attack, which is called an Omega attack, and likewise the special attack is called an Omega special, and I think the cast is called the Omega cast. But in this video, I'm just going to say EX version because it's a bit faster and simpler than saying Omega version, especially because I'm not even sure if it's supposed to be pronounced Omega version. It's just that in the text of the game, it would show the Greek letter Omega, so I'm assuming that's how they wanted you to say it. But anyway, in order to do these EX versions of either the basic attack, special attack, or the cast, you just have to hold the corresponding button down, and that is what expends mana. And that is the primary difference between Melinui and Zagreus. And I would assume that this is going to be consistent across all of Melinui's weapons, because even though we only got 2 weapons to play with in this tech test, both of them had the same sort of EX move mechanic for all 3 things: the basic attack, special attack, and the cast. As for the 2 weapons available, they were the Magic Staff and the Sister Blades. The Magic Staff is what the game starts you with, which feels very unusual because Zagreus starts with the sword in Hades 1, which is a very expected default type weapon because the sword is so well-rounded, right? Whereas in this case, the Magic Staff being the default weapon feels very unusual because expectedly, with it being a Magic Staff, it's very much a ranged zoner type weapon, but I'm assuming that the devs were trying to get the point across that Melinui is a bit more of a caster inherently than Zagreus, so maybe that's why they wanted you to start with the staff, so that way you would use more of the ranged attacks and feel comfortable playing around with the Omega moves, which is new in this game. But when this game comes out, I do not foresee myself using this Magic Staff very often just because I typically gravitate more towards up-close and personal type weapons, which is what I was expecting to find in the Sister Blades, the other weapon available in this playtest. But the Sister Blades also felt like a zoner type weapon, which is weird because you would expect them to be the premier melee weapon in this game, right? You would assume that with it being a tech test, and with one weapon being a ranged staff, and with the other one being a set of blades, that they're trying to give you 2 opposite ends of the spectrum of playstyles, right? But no, both of these weapons felt very zonery and similar to the spear from Hades 1, and it's because even though the Sister Blades are in fact a melee weapon if you do the basic attack, the special attack, the right click, it's a very long-range poke, which is why it feels like the spear from Hades 1. And with this being such a long-range poke, it is, in most cases, the safest way to do damage. So for a large majority of the playtime, I just spent mashing right-click because it was so safe. And I'm assuming, I know that this will be alleviated somewhat when you start adding packs of punishment, because presumably the timer pack of punishment will be back for this game, and when you are having to operate under a time limit, obviously you're not just going to lame out every fight. But in terms of casual players who don't really ever care about getting to the packs of punishment, I could see their impression of this game being less favorable than the first game when it is just so easy to lame out so many of these fights with these long-range weapons. Even when you are specifically trying to go for a weapon that you would expect to be more melee-focused when it gives you such a long-range zoner feel, right? I do still find the Sister Blades fun, though, because the EX version of the basic attack, it lets you dash forward. It lets you lock on to an enemy, and you can dash forward you pretty much instantaneously appear there, and not only do you do an attack, but it has such a big hitbox that it is effectively an AoE attack, and that attack was really fun to go in sometimes. But again, you have to be very selective about when you go in, when your ranged attack is so much better in most of the cases. So my suggestion with the Sister Blades, unless there's going to be an actual premier melee weapon in the game, aside from the Sister Blades. But again, right now I'm assuming that the Sister Blades are supposed to be the premier melee-focused weapon, and under that assumption, my recommendation, if they wanted to make them more melee-focused, would be to maybe decrease the range of its special attack a little bit, while increasing the speed at which you can charge the EX basic attack. Because like I said, the EX basic attack is the move that lets you go in, and it was really fun to use, and it was much more fun than spamming the special attack over and over. So that would be my suggestion for the Sister Blades in terms of just rebalancing it to make it more fun and to make it a bit more differentiated from the other weapon. Although I should mention that you can prime mana in this game. I didn't really know what the game meant at first when it said prime mana, but when it says prime mana, it means lock away certain portions of your mana, and you are offered this with certain boons. So in this game, certain boons will offer to lock a certain amount of your mana from being used, but it's in exchange for some pretty cool abilities. And I think that's a cool mechanic, because with this drawback of having some of your mana primed, you're able to get some of these boons to be way stronger than what they were in Hades 1. For example, there was a Zeus boon I really liked that locked a big portion of your mana, but every 5 seconds it would shock every enemy in the area, and I thought that was really fun. So knowing that there are certain boons that let you lock away portions of your mana, you can even lock away the entirety of your mana and have absolute zero access to it. So knowing that there are boons that allow you to do that, maybe instead of having a weapon that lets you start with a non-cast build, maybe in this game, they want you to pretty much always inherently start as a caster, and if you want to do a non-cast build, you have to actually build away from the cast build. Kind of the inverse of Hades 1, right? Because Zagreus inherently wasn't very much of a caster, and if you wanted to do a cast build with Zagreus, you had to build specifically towards a casting build, whereas in this game, like I said, it might be the inverse. Maybe Melinoi starts as a caster, and if you want to do more of a melee-focused build, not relying on casting, you have to pick out these boons that will prime your mana. I definitely did not see all the boons. I only played through this game. I only beat Hecate 6 times. I beat her 5 times in the first file, and then once you beat her 5 times, it locks you from doing any more runs. So then I started a new file to get some B-roll footage and beat her there once. So I definitely have not seen all of the boons. I'm really curious to see what other boons have the option to prime your mana, because those are the boons I'm most interested in. I also really like Hestia's boons in general. In terms of the new gods, I would say Hestia is my favorite in terms of her boons being pretty interesting. And in terms of returning gods, I would still say I really like Zeus's boons. Zeus had my favorite boons in Hades 1, but that's partly because they had so much synergy with the Eris Rail, which was my favorite weapon in Hades 1. And I think that is all I wanted to say about the player mechanics, but I still have some stuff to say about the gameplay, specifically in terms of the sub-bosses. Again, I didn't play this playtest a lot, so there might be more sub-bosses that I did not get to see, but in terms of my playtime, I encountered 2 of them. One of them is this sub-boss that stays stationary in the middle of the room and can shoot out these projectiles, and the other one creates this fog of war effect. So firstly, talking about the stationary one that shoots out projectiles, this one, its projectile attack feels weirdly hard to dodge, and I'm wondering if it's because I was playing on keyboard. So for anyone that doesn't know, you can play Hades with controller or keyboard, and there are trade-offs. There are pros and cons to both. I started playing Hades 1 originally with controller because I think controller is even recommended for the game. In Hades 2, when you launch the game, it says controller is recommended, and I think I recall it saying that in Hades 1 as well. So that is why I started playing Hades 1 with controller. But as I started playing the Ares rail more and more, I really wanted that precision with the aiming of the grenade. So the trade-off between mouse and keyboard and controller is that mouse and keyboard gives you better precision for aiming attacks, but it's at the cost of lacking any kind of nuanced movement, because on controller, you have the analog stick, which allows you to move in much more nuanced and subtle ways, which lets you avoid traps and attacks and things like that, right? Whereas on keyboard, you have to pretty much only move in 8 different directions, you know, the 4 different cardinal directions plus the 45-degree angles in between each cardinal direction. So because I was playing on keyboard, I'm thinking maybe that's why it was so hard to avoid the projectile attack from that one boss. I'm wondering if playing on controller would let you, I'm wondering if that would let you walk in a much better circle around the enemy without wasting any kind of movement. If any of you guys played the game with the controller, let me know what you thought about that sub-boss, because the boss itself wasn't particularly hard or anything. It's just that one attack seemed so weirdly difficult to avoid when I was otherwise good at everything else. And now talking about the other sub-boss, the one that has the fog of war type thing, when you walk into the room, you can't hit it from outside of the fog. So when you walk into the room, there's this big fog of war in the middle, and that is where the sub-boss resides. And even if you stand right outside of that fog of war and attack in, as far as I'm aware, I was not able to damage it at all. I couldn't find any way to damage it from standing from outside of the fog of war. So you have to walk into the fog of war, and when you walk into it, it lets you see what's going on inside of there, but then it blacks out everything else on the outside. So you pretty much have to stay in this little arena to fight it, which makes things a little claustrophobic, right? And the critique I have with this boss is that it has too long of a telegraph on its easily avoided attack. Its attack with a pretty small hitbox that you can just dodge through. You can stay on one side of the boss because this attack I'm talking about, it involves him lifting up this vine arm and then it swings it in front of itself. So if you're on the opposite side of the vine arm, you're fine. And it has weirdly too long of a telegraph when it's otherwise already pretty easily avoided. But the weird thing is that it has pretty much no telegraph on its attack that actually reaches full screen. And by full screen, I don't literally mean the entire screen. I mean effectively full screen, because you're having to fight in this tiny little arena in order to hurt it, right? Because when fighting this enemy, I had to play around this attack so much with it having pretty much no telegraph. I would try to kind of dance along the border of this fog of war in which it lets you see the inside and lets you see the outside. So I would try to just tiptoe in, shoot it, and then step out to kind of bait this attack out and be able to step away from it. But that was not really an effective strat because it seemed extremely arbitrary when this attack would actually come out. So I pretty much just always had to eat some damage every time I fought this boss, and it did not feel skill-based at all. It felt kind of like a crapshoot every time because of its full screen attack having no telegraph when I'm able to dodge its other attack every single time super easy. So I think they should decrease the telegraph on the attack that I talked about first and increase the telegraph on the full screen attack, if that makes sense. And as for the actual area boss, which is Hecate in this case, I liked the Hecate fight a lot more than the sub-bosses. The only critique I have with Hecate is that her attack, which curses you to be a sheep, it seems completely unavoidable, because even though I managed to dodge it for a pretty decent amount of time, it seems to never go away, the projectile that tracks you. It just keeps on chasing you forever. So I think maybe you're supposed to always get hit by it, and you just have to keep on dodging it and allow yourself to get hit by it when you think it's an okay time to turn into a sheep, and then you have to survive as a sheep for a few seconds. But it feels weird that it's completely unavoidable So in a lot of cases, I would just let myself get hit by it immediately to be done with the whole sheep curse as quickly as possible. But I'm not sure if that's how it is designed. It seems weird if you just can't avoid it, right? Although there is a sprint boon. One of the few sprint boons that I actually could see working was, I think it was Hestia's sprint. And it allows you to destroy projectiles as you dash through them, and then it puts a burn on the cinder of said projectile. I did have that boon once, but I don't think I ever used it in the Hecate fight. I'm really curious now thinking about it if that boon could let you dash through the sheep curse projectile from Hecate. That is the only way I can speculate getting through that attack. But even if that works, it means you have to have a specific boon, and you're not actually dodging the attack, you are just dodging into it, you're dashing into it to destroy it, right? So maybe that's a bit of tech that they wanted people to discover, but I still think it's weird if there is an actual unavoidable attack from a boss. I think that's a little bit of a weird game design. Let me know if you guys managed to dodge it. Let me know if I was just bad at avoiding it. Maybe you actually have to do something else, or just keep on dodging it for even longer than what I did. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. I'm definitely excited for Hades 2, but I'm still not sure if I want to play early access because I'm not too big of a fan of early access. I really don't like essentially paying money to get into a beta test, which is what early access is. Plus, there are plenty of other things that I want to do in the meantime. And let me know if there's anything I missed, because again, I know I didn't encounter every boon, and I didn't encounter every keepsake either. I only got a few keepsakes. And normally I would want to spend a lot more time in something like this before doing an impressions video. Normally I would want to make sure I see every boon and check out every keepsake. But I really wanted to get this video done before this weekend because this weekend is EVO Japan. And I know that once I start watching the announcements at EVO Japan, it's going to get me so hyped on fighting games. I'm not going to really care about playing anything other than fighting games in the meantime. Also, Megaton Musashi just randomly dropped on Steam in the West. I did not think that game was ever getting localized, but it just randomly dropped with no marketing. And I think I want to play that game and review it for the other channel, for the Gundam channel, Tanuki Type. So thanks for watching, everyone, and let me know what you think. And bye for now.